Hello everyone, so it's Sarah again. So I'm actually going to start by saying our original lesson today, the recording cut halfway through. I'm not really sure why, but because of that, we lost half our work. So I'm just going to be starting over today with a pre-recorded kind of overview of what we went over today. It'll be just like a lesson, just nobody here but me. And so I'll just take you through everything again and then post this on YouTube so that everyone has the chance to kind of have someone talk them through just the presentation and everything. So we'll get started right away. I'm going to share my screen to the presentation. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for everyone who's come so far, watched our recorded videos. We really do appreciate it. And so we're going to start by kind of going over today a recap of what we learned yesterday. Then we'll talk about math and operators in Python, and then followed by functions. And then we have an activity today that's going to be broken up into two parts. The first part we'll just kind of do in the beginning, and then we're going to take a moment to learn about if-else conditions in Python, and then move forward to the second part of our activity. So to kind of review what we've gone over to yesterday, we started with installing and downloading Jupyter Notebook, learning how to open it, make new files, and run code inside of it. Then we learned about lists, variables such as strings and integers, and then also functions. So we learned about print and then some of the other functions that can be used in regards to lists. So we're going to start with some math today. It's actually really fun to do in Python, much easier than in real life, but you can use different math operators within Python that will allow you to like add, subtract, divide, and multiply different integers or variables that you place within your code. So they're kind of self-descriptive here, but on the right-hand side of the text, you'll see the symbol that will be kind of used within that text. So just to give you a little example, I'm going to share my Jupyter Notebook and we can kind of look at a couple math options. So here I've written y equals 3 and x equals 5. So those are two different variables that I've created. And then I'm going to store in result some type of mathematical operation done on these two variables. So if I put a plus sign here, I'm going to get 8. If I put a minus sign, I'm going to get -2. Ooh, didn't mean to run another one. If I do multiplication, I'm going to get 15, and so on and so forth. So again, it's just a very simple concept in Python, but it's very important because going forward we'll be using a lot of math in regards to data and manipulating that data. So it's just a good overview to have. So let's go back. So now I'm going to take us back to our presentation. And so in our presentation, we're going to start now talking about creating functions. So we've already used functions like append and print in our code, which are ones that we know. But functions overall can be something you also create. So if you want to create a specific line of code that does something every time you call it, you can do that. So here, this first block actually is a little bit wrong. So you don't have the equal sign. That's not supposed to be there. That's a typo. But so whenever you define a function, you start with def. DEF is like its own type of function, which pretty much lets Python know that you're going to be creating, well, your own function. Then that's followed by the function name. Whenever you type that in, it appears in blue. And then that's followed by the 2 arguments or more that you want to put in. So an argument is like when you're printing a function and you type print and you put whatever string or variable you want it to show, that would be considered an argument or parameter that you're passing on through the function. So in this case below, I made one that's called thank you. And so if you call the function thank you and put a name in, then it's going to print that along with thank you for being so like a part of our class. So just to give you a little example, we're going to start our own activity today. And so we're going to start by opening a new Jupyter Notebook. So I'm going to go to the home and open a new Python file. And when I open this new file, I'm going to be running my calculator. So I want to call it that. It's really good to give your files descriptive names because as you build onto your experience and start creating more and more code, it kind of helps to be able to have it all stored and in a way that you can know what that code is just by reading the title. So in this case, we start with DEF, which always lets them know that we are going to be creating a function. I'm going to call it myCalc. And then the parameters I want to put in are number 1 and number 2. And this is always followed by, I just lost my recording. 1 second. So I lost my screen share, 1 second. So then it's followed by a colon. And then if you see right here, my little bar has already tabbed in my text. So whenever you're creating a function and you want to place your code within it, whatever you want that function to run is indented. If I put it out here like this in my backspace, that's technically not part of my function anymore. So what we call this little tabbing or indenting is nesting. So the code that's nested inside the function is what it will run. So that's just an important thing to note. Also, whenever you start a line with this hashtag or pound sign, that means you're creating a comment. That entire line will no longer be code, but be like a little note that you can place within it. So if I put a hashtag here, see how it all like no longer becomes code. So it's really helpful when you're coding to start creating notes for yourself so you know what things run without having to like kind of guess. So for myCalc, our goal here is to create a calculator. And so that calculator is going to do several things, including assigning the two arguments, and then adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing them, along with printing the results of those operations. So we're going to start by putting, this is my calculator. And then I'm going to start by saying add equals number 1 plus number 2. I'm just going to type like this for each one. Minus, and then multiply. You can do these in any order. You can name them other stuff if you want. And so now I want to print those results. So I'll add a quick print, and then I'll do add, subtract, multiply, and divide. You don't want to type and though. Sometimes when I'm coding, I actually type what I'm speaking. So that can be sometimes a little not helpful. But so then when I want to actually go back to what real code is, like and no longer have it be a part of the function, I just go back to no longer being indented. And so in this case, I'm going to call myCalc, and then I put the two numbers in. So I'm going to run 10 and 5 in this case. We're going to run the code, and those are my results. So when you add them together, you get 15, 5, which is when you subtract, 50 when you multiply, and 2.0 when you divide. So now what I'm going to do is show you what the original code looks like. So this is what it can look like if you want to add like tons of comments and also print it so that it looks a little more professional. So in this case, when I called my calculator, which is a little similar, I did, 20 added to 10 equals whatever. You don't have to do that, obviously, in this case, because we're just practicing the mathematical operators. But so if you are doing like a project, that's just a little thing to know, is that sometimes it's better to also write words with those. Oh, my screen sharing is paused. I am sorry. So I'm gonna take it back to here. So there is our lovely myCalculator function, including the print results, which include words. So that just makes it look a little more cleaner sometimes when you're doing like homework or stuff. So now we're going to talk about if we run this function here, and I'm going to go back to my Jupyter notebook. If you run this function, sorry. So if you run this function here, with the first number being less than the second, so I'm going to do 10 and 20, the results are going to have a negative along with a number that's less than 1. So in this case, we're going to add the second challenge of trying to make a calculator that only runs calculations if the first number is greater than the second, because the parameters, so to speak, of our calculator is we don't want it to run operations when the division makes it less than 1 and the subtraction makes it a negative number. So what we're going to do here is we're going to learn a little bit about if-else statements. So this is a condition that you can add onto your code that allows you to make decisions within it. So in this if-then statement, you can place a condition in the first part. So let's say if our first number is greater than our second number, followed by a colon, then we place this code that we want to run. So in this case, we place if, num1 is greater than num2, run the calculations. But if else, so if it's not that, we want it to just ignore. And there are two ways we can do the ignore. You can just place print, this doesn't work, please put a higher number in the first number spot, like index. Or you can do pass in this case, which we'll talk a little more about. Feel free to pause at any time too if you're trying to work through something or if you want to look at a slide a little longer. So then here we see we have all these different conditionals that can be used within an if-else statement. So we have less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. In is like if you have a list and you're trying to find out if something's in it, does not equal, and equals. Feel free to screenshot this too and save it. So, and now the part of the activity is we're going to be adding lines of code that, again, partition our calculations based on whether the first number is greater than the second number. And again, go ahead and pause. I'm going to go straight into how we would do that. Normally, I would allow time that you can figure this out on your own in the class. But so we're going to go here, and this is what my calc is so far. I'm going to add a line of code here that says if num1 is greater than or equal to num2, colon, and then I need to tab this all over. Remember how we nest things? That works for if-then statements too. And then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to type else, comma, and there are two choices for else in this case. Whenever we are doing this calculation function, it doesn't matter if the first number is less than, if the first number is less than the second number, we're not going to run anything. So you can write pass, and what pass will do is it will just kind of ignore it and move on to whatever else. So if you had more things you want it to do, it's just going to ignore whatever and keep on going in your code. However, we can also just type print, this will not work. So now if I run this and I make this will not, or no work, I should fix that. So this will not work.